All right, it is good to see everybody. We're continuing our introduction into Paul's letter that was sent to the Galatians. We talked last week about what a Judaizing teacher believed, what they taught. And I think it's important, again, I want to make sure that we understand the distinction. When we talk about the Judaizing teachers, we need to, just make sure that we understand these are not the Jews that are the antagonists to the gospel. Now, they're Jews. Don't get me wrong. Don't just assume that I'm saying they're not Jews because of what's written up here. They are not, maybe I should put the Jews in quotations. Maybe that'll help. All right, there. They are not the Jews, the ones that as Paul's traveling from city to city, and the Jews became jealous, and they did something to him. They ran him out of town, or the ones who are the constant enemies to the cross. That's not what the Judaizing teachers are. The Judaizing teachers are Christians. They are Jewish Christians, and we see them in Acts chapter 15. These are the ones that are under discussion. Acts chapter 15. Mike spent a good bit of time, and we will too at some point. I just want to point out, this is often what we call the Jerusalem Conference or Council or whatever word you want to use, when Paul and Barnabas, with the folks who were teaching something contrary, in Antioch, they went back to Jerusalem to deal with this. So, let's see. It says here in verse 5, some of the believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees and stood up and said, "It is necessary to circumcise them and command them to keep the law of Moses." These are the Judaizing teachers. These are Jewish Christians. They're believers. They're not antagonistic to the cross at all. That's not their point. They are confident in what they believe. And what is it that they're teaching? That if you are a Gentile out here, then what? All right, in order to come to the cross, you have to become a Jew. And you think of the law of Moses, kind of like this little funnel that you have to come through here. And then oftentimes, what is the singular command that Paul will often use? All right, so circumcision. And he uses that as, and I don't know, I feel like I've used these terms before, a synecdoche, or as a metonymy. You all familiar with what those are? A synecdoche is where you have one little part that represents the whole. If we're talking, I've been using the word referring to conception in the paper that I'm putting together that talks about not just the point of conception, but it includes, when it's spoken, the conception, the pregnancy, the delivery, and then the raising of the children. That all of that can be wrapped up if someone just uses the word conception. Or just a minute ago, I used the word the cross. Well, what does the cross represent? Christianity. Okay, Christianity, sure, but just the cross itself, what is it? Yeah, Kevin?
Fulfillment of God's promise.
All right, simpler. You guys are overthinking it. What's the cross? Okay, so we had a couple people, death, burial, and resurrection. Did all of that happen on the cross? All right, yeah, the cross itself was just the death penalty. That was the death. But if I say that we are saved by the cross, do you understand that to mean we're simply saved because Jesus died? No, there's no power in his death unless what? Unless he's raised from the dead, right? And so inherent in that, you use the word cross, but it carries with it a lot more baggage, right? A lot more is invested in this idea than just the cross. And so circumcision is that way, that it is used oftentimes by Paul not as the command, but it is a command that is representative of all the commands. That when he says that one must be circumcised, when they stood up and said someone needs to be circumcised in Acts 15, they didn't simply mean that if you fulfill that one command, you're fine. What they meant is that that one command represents the entirety of the law, the works of the law, and that you have to not only be circumcised, but do the rest of the works as well. It's just used, instead of listing off all the works of the law, it just lists the one, and it assumes everybody gets it. Does that make sense? So, when you see him mention circumcision, talk about circumcision, usually it's not just that one thing involved, it's an idea that carries with it more than that. All right, so making sure that we're remembering what Judaizing teachers are. They believe that you come here, that the law of Moses is what provides your justification. That is, that when you come into the law of Moses, you become an Israelite, then you now are part of a whole group. You know, it's not you individually, it's you as an Israelite, and all the the law of Moses, all of that would provide the means of justification, but that seems to be different from specifically salvation itself, because remember, these are Christians. They understand that salvation comes from where? Jesus. The cross, right? And by the cross, do I mean just the death? No, right? So they understand this, but it's these things that God looks at and says, okay, you've done that. Great, good. I declare you worthy of salvation, is kind of the idea. Now, we'll dig into this more, and hopefully as we get through Galatians, and especially down the road when we get into Romans, this stuff is going to start jumping off the page. It's going to be hard to miss once you reorient your mind to start looking for it and seeing it in these two letters in particular. But I think we need to ask this question: why is this such an issue? Why is it that you have these Jews who are saying, Paul, hold on a second, it sounds like you're saying that somebody can become a Gentile without becoming a Jew first, without giving themselves over to the law of Moses, that they have just a straight shot. How could you do that, Paul? What is so wrong with that to a Jew? So, we've got someone in the back here, Mike. So, Bruce, the one furthest away is going to comment first, and then someone up here, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand. Okay, Kevin's good enough. All right. I just want to make sure we got both corners at the same time. Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, if you're a Jew and you can't keep all of the little bitty pieces of the law, Christ didn't do away with the law. He just emphasized its importance. So if you try to become a Jew first and then become a Christian, it's going to seem impossible to the people of that day, especially the Jewish people. That's the problem.
Okay. Now, we understand the issue, right? I mean, as we look at this, we're on Paul's side of this discussion, right? Everybody here, we're on Paul's side of this discussion. Okay, all right, just making sure. Otherwise, we need to go into more detail on some of this. And so, yeah, we understand that a Gentile, if he wanted to have anything from the law of Moses, then he would have to do that in what way? Okay, sorry, I might be getting on to what Kevin was saying. Kevin, go ahead and make your comment, and then we'll jump into it.
Well, I think last week we talked about the idea of the seed and the promise that was made to Abraham. And
Yes.
so the question of who is the seed, or is that the nation, or is that someone else? Is
Yeah.
the question.
All right, excellent. And I'm gonna put Abraham down here just real quick, so we will come back to that. I do want, though, to get back kind of what Bruce was kind of getting across here. This is adding a whole lot of extra stuff that is completely, totally unnecessary. We understand that. Paul understood it. The problem is that the Jews didn't understand that. There's a hand in the back, Mike. Go ahead, Kelly. We're working the corners. This is fantastic. We've gone back there to up here. Now as far back there as we can get.
It's kind of not fair. I mean, these Jewish Christians, they did a lot of work to do Judaism right. And now they're Christians, and wait a second, these guys just, they just have to stop eating, they just have to believe and be baptized, and they can eat pork? And they can keep doing, they don't have to get circumcised? Like, I could see how it would not seem fair.
All right. So it is unfair. I'm gonna shift my question so that I can get, I can change it to the answer that I want to write up on the board. If you are a Jew, what makes you feel special, so special that everyone should become a Jew first? Now, I'm going to go with something that you said. They were given the law of Moses, right? Now, you are looking at it it wouldn't be fair if someone new didn't have to do that. But consider the flip side of that. Who else has been given the law of Moses? Nobody else, right? All right, I'm going in. I don't want to talk about them yet. We'll talk about them once we have them listed. Was there another hand, Kathy?
Yeah, for one thing, they were always thought of themselves, and they were God's chosen people.
Yes.
But if you look at Romans 3:1, it says, "What is the advantage of being a Jew?" And
Well, we're not discussing them yet.
okay,
You're not allowed to do
Never
Paul's
mind.
argument yet.
scratch that up.
Yeah. But I'm gonna put this up there. They had the covenant. They were God's chosen people. And I said that to Kathy, but Kathy's already seeing, I think, what I'm trying to accomplish here. What we're writing up here are things that Paul addresses. It's as if Paul has had to deal with these questions and these issues. And so as he writes Galatians, and especially as he writes Romans, he's going to start answering some of these things where the Jews say, we're pretty special because we've got Abraham, we've got the law of Moses, we've got the covenant. What else do they have? This one might be a little more difficult to read my mind on this one. I've got one more. It's like we're playing Family Feud here, and there's a survey of one, and you have to get it right. Everyone's like, well, I quit that game right away. Forget that. If he says it's hard, I'm just going to put it up here. They have history on their side, don't they? How long have they been a people? Hold on. Yeah, up here. Is this something else to list or? Okay, gotcha. All right.
starting to talk about this and the Jewish Christians, it's the parable, and I'm not coming up with where he talks about the workers in the field and them all getting paid the same at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones were unhappy that they all got the same payment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that plays in really to what Kelly was saying earlier about the unfairness of this, that especially with dealing with the law of Moses and the history that they've had behind it. How long, if you take my dating for the Exodus, how long have they been a nation? Okay, around 14 to 1500 years by this point, right? It's very good. So, Lorraine obviously takes my dating for the Exodus. I was waiting for that to be the next question. Well, what's your dating for the Exodus? Around 1500 years, what has God done with these people for the last, we'll just say 1500 years. Make it a nice, fun number. Kevin? What's that again?
He's provided for them and he's punished them. And
Okay.
so I would say, as far as a nation, they've been scattered, broken up. Even though they've been a people, in the world's view, they've been they've had times of decline and what have you. So he's dealt with them in all the different areas,
Okay.
punishment and prosperity.
Yeah, if you kind of start right here, we'll just start our timeline, with David. We can do it here. We'll just have them coming up out of Exodus right here. So you start this timeline in Exodus 24, and you go through, and you get to Jeroboam and Rehoboam, where it kind of splits, and then you have the northern nation that kind of tapers off right here, 722, but Judah keeps on going, the southern. Then they go down where? Into what captivity? Babylon. Get 70 years, but do they stay there? No, they come back. And then this line, as a people in this land, continues all the way to where? Well, yeah, into the first century, right? When Jesus comes, they're still there. Destruction in 70 AD, but they're still kind of there, destroys the temple. And my date may be off. I want to say it's around 125, when you had the next rebellion, when basically Rome came in and said, all right, get out of here. Dusted them away and said, you're not allowed to even have your land anymore. And that brought the effective end completely at that point with that revolt. But for all of this time, how many other nations have risen and fallen, come and gone? They're just left. There's nothing there. Rome doesn't even come onto the picture until like up here or so. This whole picture, in fact, Rome, the Romans, they may not have liked the Jews as a people, but they respected the Jews as a people because of how historical they were. The Romans were all about anything that had longevity to it. And so, yeah, they respected the Jewish religion, even though they may not have liked it. They respected it because of its longevity. Only God could have brought them through all of this and preserved them and kept them till here, right? So why did the Jews feel special? They were the descendants of the chosen one, and we have this word we talked about last week. Kevin brought it up, the promise of the seed in Genesis chapter 22, but it corresponds with chapter 12 as well. They have the law of Moses, not given to the world at large. It is given to them. And remember, when God gave it to them, he brought them to Mount Sinai. And in Exodus chapter 19, he said to Moses, tell the people this, you are a chosen race. You are a royal priesthood. This you are here to be a kingdom of priests. In Exodus chapter 19, around 5, 6, or somewhere around in there, it is where he says, you are very specifically chosen out, and you are special for what I'm going to accomplish in this world as a nation. He gave them the covenant there in Exodus chapter 24. A covenant nobody else got. This wasn't a worldwide covenant. This was something very specific to them, and kept them for so long. You can almost see them saying to Paul, if this right here, if this is not a part of salvation, then what was this all about? Why did God do all of this, keep us special as he did, maintain the law of Moses as he did, provide the covenant, do everything? Why did God do all of this to just all of a sudden take it and throw it away as if it means nothing? Can you see that issue that would be going through their heads? And they'd say, that doesn't make any sense, Paul. There's no way that God would do all of this if he didn't intend for it to be a piece of the final product. It doesn't make sense. Now, what is this kind of mindset? Who feels like reading? And you say that you have to be able to find Jeremiah. So this will benefit those who use their phones, for their Bible, where they're like, oh, I can find the J-E-R really easily right there. Mike, can you pick someone? Jeremiah chapter 7 and verse 4.
Do not trust in deceptive words saying, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord.
All right. Now, go ahead and do the second part, the commenting. I said that, right? Who wants to read and comment on a passage? Didn't I say that?
Not say that.
No, did I? I didn't say that part. Oh, okay. Do not think in your hearts or listen to the deceptive words, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. What's going on there in Jeremiah that's causing him to say this? Anybody remember what this was all about? Someone tell me where Jeremiah is in Israel's history. Considering he wrote not just Jeremiah, but the next book too. What's after Jeremiah? Lamentations. What's Lamentations all about? Yeah, it's the destruction of Jerusalem, right? So where does Jeremiah fit in our timeline? Yeah, he's in this area, right in here. And this is pre-destruction of Jerusalem, where people were shouting, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. Why were they shouting that? Any thoughts?
That's what they thought would save them.
Okay, that's what they thought would save them. Or the idea God would never bring all of this here, create this system, have us build the temple, and have everything else. He would never do that just to simply what? To let it be destroyed. As long as we have the temple, we're fine. Nothing can happen to us. We have the temple of the Lord, and God will take care of us, right? Is that the reality? Was that the reality during that time frame? No, we just said it. The temple's going to get destroyed, right? They're going to have to build a second temple. And right there in Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 5, he says, instead, if you really correct your ways and your actions and act justly toward one another, if you no longer oppress the resident alien, the fatherless, the widow, no longer shed innocent blood in this place or follow other gods, bringing harm on yourselves, I will allow you to live in this place, the land I gave to your ancestors long ago and forever. But look, you keep trusting deceitful words that cannot help. They were putting their hope and their trust in something else that they looked at. They viewed it as part of God's relationship with them. And what God says is, no, it's not, really. I mean, it's important, sure, but here's what's really important, that you act with justice and love towards one another. You put away idolatry, and you live the way you're supposed to be living. That's what's really important. And it's almost as if Paul is dealing with a very similar mindset with these Judaizing teachers. Instead of the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, they're shouting, the law of Moses, the law of Moses, the law of Moses. You know, we have the law of Moses. This is what God has given to us. Or you could say they have Abraham. They have the covenant. All of this stuff means that they, as a Jewish heritage, a Jewish people, have a special relationship with God. And without this, can you have a special relationship with God as God has created it? The answer to a Jew, even a Jewish Christian, is no. They're tied together, intricately tied together. Especially as Mike spent so much time trying to get across, how many Gentiles were Christians in the first 10 years or so of Christianity?
A lot.
Go the other way. Was that sarcastic? Oh, okay. In the roughly the first 10 years, how many Gentiles were Christians?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. I was wondering. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big fat zero. Really? Yeah. Go ahead, Serena, when the mic arrives to you. Go for it.
So, really, when you are baptized, all of the law of Moses and everything else really is there, because when Jesus died on the cross and rose again, he fulfilled that law. So when you become a Christian, you do have that, all the law and everything. I realize they didn't see that then, but you do have all, the promise of Abraham and all of that, the covenant and the history and all of that when you become a Christian, because it's all contained with it, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think that's what the picture of the olive tree is meant to represent. When you have those which were not natural branches grafted into it in Paul's letter to the Romans, the it is really talking about everything. The roots, you've got this tree, and these roots really are everything that's associated with God's people leading up to the time of Christ. And so you now have God's people as a result of Abraham, the law. I mean, everything else is here. And then you have the branches coming off. If anyone wants to take a picture of this, you could probably make prints and sell it, I'm sure. My beautiful design here. It kind of looks like an animal with a bunch of tentacles, actually. But this is the picture where he says, look, we can take the Jews off and we can graft unnatural branches in, but they join in exactly as what you're saying. What is not just the law of Moses, but it's the covenant that's completed for Moses, which goes back to the covenant, even part of it, to some degree, David's covenant from 2 Samuel 7 comes to its completion. The covenant with Abraham, Genesis chapter 12, the covenant with Noah in Genesis 9, and even going all the way back to Genesis 2 and 1 and 2, the way that he talked with Adam. All of that comes to a culmination at the cross. And then you have this, this beautiful picture of God's people that are tied together through who and what God is. I think what you're saying is accurate. And fits into the picture that Paul is trying to give to them in Romans. Now, here, let me ask this question. If you are a Jew, if Paul is right, if Paul is correct, that you can simply come to the cross. Oh, wait, hold on. I didn't finish the discussion, did I? I just realized. Serena got me sidetracked. Good job. Yeah. For the first 10 years or so, how many Gentile Christians were there? None. And so Christianity, for approximately 10 years or so, is a Jewish Christianity. Because Judaism and Christianity are not mutually exclusive. You can be a Jew and a Christian at the same time. And all the Christians starting off were Jews and Christians at the same time, and it just made sense that this is the way that it is. It was just the water that they swam in. They wouldn't have even considered that there would be a difference until Acts chapter 10. Yeah, Bruce?
Yeah, if you look at it from the perspective of the Galatians at that time, I mean, why would you want to be a Jewish person anyhow? Because, I mean, they were being oppressed first by the Babylonians and then by the Romans. And so the Jewish people were not the center of the universe according to other people or the Gentiles or the Romans. They were the center of their world. But why would you want to be a Christian if you had all these other gods you could worship?
I would push back against that. I would say a Jew, yes, what they would say is not, oh man, I can't believe that we were put down by the Egyptians or put down by the Babylonians. The Jews by the first century would have said, I can't believe our forefathers were so dumb to have rebelled against God and gone into these things. But they would say, look how awesome our God is, that even though we went into captivity in Babylon, he brought us back. Even though we did these things, our God is so amazing that he did not leave us nor forsake us, but he's brought us through all of this. That is the way that they, would have presented it. And don't forget, when Jesus talked about them being enslaved in John 9, I think, what did they tell him? We've never been enslaved to anyone. What are you talking about? And I think in their minds, it's legitimate. Because did the Babylonians really punish them here? Who punished them? God. The Babylonians didn't enslave them. God enslaved them using the Babylonians. I think that's what they would say is, the Babylonians without God would never have triumphed over us. Nobody can triumph over us unless it is God who's done it. And they, I think, would say the same thing about the Romans in their situation, where, yeah, they may be down, but they know the prophecy, and they're looking for the Messiah who's going to bring them out. And so I think that would be kind of the attitude, but it's a very positive spin that they have. Jan, did you have?
From the northern kingdom and had spread around, come back for Pentecost.
Okay, so the question in Acts chapter 2, where you have all of those nations listed, are those the Jews from the northern kingdom who had been basically uprooted and taken somewhere else, and they're just kind of gone, to which I would say what you're seeing in Acts chapter 2 are the dispersion, and the dispersion really happens around in here, in this time frame, the Second Temple Judaism, where they really go out and about. These guys, we don't have enough information at all. These would be the dispersion, the diaspora. Those are legitimate Jews who have just decided, for whatever reasons, to take their places in other places, which the advent of the synagogue system in Babylonian captivity gave them the precedent and the ability to do that. And so they started doing it. It's a really good question, though. So let me just kind of, because we're running out of time very quickly here. If Paul is right, let's see here. That should be over there. Tell me about grace. If Paul is right, then what is grace a result of? How do you receive grace? Or grace can only come about because of what? Let me put it that way. Yeah, Ryan?
The blood of Christ.
Well, that's our answer.
Okay.
But what's their answer?
It would be the law would be their answer.
Well, that's what they think grace comes from. But if Paul's right and that the law is not a part of this, grace can only come from sin. Right? What he's saying is that God extends his grace to those who have earned grace by being worthy of grace. And so you can become justified by the law of Moses, which puts you in a relationship with God, by which your sins are no longer going to be accounted against you. And so you can do that through the law. But if you don't have that, then grace is the result of sin. And if you want to see more grace, then what needs to happen? You have to have more sin. You know, and does that sound right? You know, grace comes from sin? That doesn't, that doesn't really compute. But that's the result. If the law of Moses doesn't have anything to do with this, then the only thing that you can do to put yourself in a position to get grace is to sin. Yeah, Kevin?
So is this point that you're making here the result of not putting Jesus Christ in his proper place as the seed? Is that what makes this an argument?
Yeah, bear in mind, they did not see necessarily, at least so far as I understand it, that the cross itself is the place in and of itself of the dispensing of God's grace, that God's grace came to those who had demonstrated through the law of Moses that they were in a covenant relationship to which God gave his grace to those who were in this covenant relationship.
Well, I guess still to my point is, though, is it they're holding on to that because they've misplaced who Christ is and his position.
I mean, that's fair. Although I think that they still would have recognized Jesus as the ultimate giver of salvation itself. But as they would look at it, grace is heaped up only if sin is heaped up. Whereas for them, grace is dispensed as you partake of and you are a part of the law of Moses. So to the Jewish Christian who sees that grace is dispensed in the law of Moses, if you take this away, then you've got nothing else to dispense the grace through. The only way that grace can abound is if what? If sin abounds, right? So that's the logical place that they come from by saying, well, I guess this is how grace comes. So grace is a result of sin, which is bad, not a result of the law, which is good. That's an argument that they would have against what Paul is teaching. So then, if that is the case, if what Paul is saying is true, then the law itself is now connected to what? If grace and sin are connected, and they saw that the law was connected to grace, then what's their logical conclusion? The law is now connected to what? Sin. Is the law sin? Because it sounds, Paul, as if that's what you're saying. It sounds like you are making an argument that the law itself is sin, since we make these ties between it. By the way, are these phrases sounding familiar to you? Shall we sin so that grace may abound? Is the law sin? Right? These are the objections that Paul is having to deal with, and he does in Romans. And it's important for us to not just say, okay, well, here's the objection, now here's how he answers it, but we need to say, where does this objection even come from? Why is it that anyone would ever say, is the law sin? And Paul actually has to say, no, you're totally missing the point on this. Of course not. But this is the mindset that he's having to deal with. So, if this is all the case, then God, and this goes back to what we talked about right here, God is not faithful. Now keep in mind, these are objectors to Paul. This is not Paul. Paul would never say God is not faithful, right? These are the objectors saying, Paul, you don't make any sense, bud, because if what you're saying is true, then that means that God reneged on his promise to Abraham, and he is not faithful to his promise. By the way, there's a huge movement in the last 40 years or so to look at a phrase, the righteousness of God. Are you familiar with that phrase? Heard that phrase, the righteousness of God? There's a very compelling argument to understand that instead of the righteousness of God, to understand it as the faithfulness of God. The faithfulness of God. That is God being faithful to his promises. God being faithful to the seed promise. God being faithful to Israel. God being faithful to the promise that he's making to the Gentiles. God being faithful. And so when you see the words, the righteousness of God, now apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been revealed, right? Romans 3, or even in it, the righteousness of God is made known from faith to faith, just as it's written, the righteous one shall live by faith. It could very well be that he's arguing against those who say, Paul, if what you're saying is true, then God is not faithful to his promise. And by the way, all of these are then to say, so Paul, you're wrong, because grace does not come from sin, the law is not tied to sin, God is faithful. All right? There's not a Jewish Christian alive who would believe these things. So don't get me wrong. They're not teaching these things. They're saying the logical outcome of Paul taking this out is these things would be true, and that's why they say, Paul, you got to leave it in. You're messing this up. And then one more thing that I really want to get through, because I want to get into the text next week. We only have so many weeks to get through this, and you guys are probably getting sick of me not getting all the way through a class. So I want to get through this one. I want you to think about the fact this is Paul's very first writing. And we have this picture sometimes of these perfected individuals that God chooses, the most holy and best people possible. And you know, there's almost like this kumbaya thing that's going on between the apostles, and they've got this, solidarity among them, that they are one uniform group. There's the apostles, and everyone follows them, and everybody lives happily ever after. When the reality is, Paul is a person. He is. And I think it's important that we allow that. Kevin, you're the one I was talking about with, right? I think on this last week, that you have to allow character growth. You have to see that there's some kind of change that's going to take place. And when you compare Galatians and Romans, which they're doing two different things, so it's not totally apples to apples, but they're dealing with the same arguments and the same information, you see a huge change between Galatians and Romans and the way that Paul conducts himself. In Galatians, Paul is emotional. He is raw. He's crude at times. I mean, he's not the paragon of what you would expect. An apostle of Jesus Christ is going to be this perfected, picture of everything. That is not what you get. And what you also see, Paul is not impressed with the other apostles. There is not a uniformity that is taking place. In fact, you can kind of see him and some animosity directed from Paul towards them. They're not unified. They will be. And you see that down the road, but early at this stage in the game, it just doesn't seem to be that way. Galatians is not a fun, good, feel-good, encouraging, pray without ceasing type of a letter. It just isn't. And we're going to miss a lot if we just assume that Paul is perfect. All right, I'm going to dump that out there, and we don't have time to discuss it or have any follow-up questions because we are out of time. All right, thanks a lot, guys.